Silver Wings Over Hell. The Legend of the P-51 Mustang. Part 1. Angels at 28,000 feet. The oxygen mass crackled with frost at the edges, ice crystals forming where Captain Jake Callahan's breath condensed in the savage cold of 28,000 feet. Through the gun sight of his P-51D Mustang, he watched the black crosses on the wings of the Messerschmitt Bf 109 grow larger, too large. His gloved finger hovered over the trigger. The Merlin engine roared behind him, a mechanical heart thundering at 3,000 revolutions per minute, drowning out everything except the staccato bursts of static in his headset. Bandit 9 o'clock high. Brake left, Red Og 3. Tracer rounds stitched the sky past his canopy, white-hot streaks of phosphorus that seemed close enough to touch. Callahan hauled back on the stick, feeling the G-forces crush down on his chest like an anvil. The horizon tilted violently. Below, through scattered clouds at 15,000 feet, he could see the silver glint of B-17 flying fortresses. His charges, his reason for being here in this frozen hell above Bavaria. The bombers were bleeding. One fortress trailed black smoke, falling behind the formation like a wounded bird struggling to keep pace with the flock. This was March 6, 1944. This was the war. And this was why the P-51 Mustang existed. Callahan rolled inverted and pulled through, the Mustang responding with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The German fighter flashed beneath him, the pilot's face barely visible through the greenhouse canopy. Another man, another soul caught in this dance of death. Callahan's 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns hammered to life, the recoil shuddering through the airframe. Shell casings erupted from the wing bays, glittering brass spinning away into the void. The Messerschmitt's tail section disintegrated in a spray of aluminum and fabric. One more enemy that wouldn't kill his friends. But there were always more. Part 2. The Making of a Mustang Man. 6 months earlier, Jake Callahan had been just another fighter pilot candidate at Thunderbolt Field in Oklahoma, learning to master the P-47 Thunderbolt. A capable fighter, but short-legged, unable to escort the bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The strategic bombing campaign over Nazi Germany was bleeding. American and British bombers flew deep into the Reich without escort for the final, most dangerous legs of their missions. Luftwaffe fighters tore them apart with impunity. Losses were catastrophic, sometimes 20, 30, even 40 bombers lost in a single mission. Young men barely out of high school, cremated at altitude in flying coffins. Something had to change. That something was the North American P-51 Mustang. Callahan first saw one on a rain-soaked morning in September 1943, when a squadron, the 357th Fighter Group, transitioned from Thunderbolts to the sleek new fighter. The Mustang sat on the tarmac like a predatory bird, its polished aluminum skin gleaming even under gray English skies. It looked fast just sitting still. The laminar flow wing design gave it an aerodynamic efficiency that bordered on the miraculous. But it was the engine that made the difference. The Packard-built Rolls-Royce Merlin V12, producing 1,490 horsepower and driving a 4-blade Hamilton standard propeller. The aircraft specifications read like a love letter to speed and endurance. Maximum velocity of 437 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. Service ceiling of 41,900 feet. But most importantly, most critically, an operational range of 1,650 miles with external drop tanks. That meant Berlin. That meant anywhere the bombers needed to go, the Mustang could follow. "Gentlemen," said Colonel Henry R. Spicer, their group commander, standing before the assembled pilots in the briefing hut at RAF Leiston, "this aircraft will win the air war over Europe. But only if you survive long enough to learn how to fly her properly." Callahan learned. Through freezing November mornings, practicing formation flying over the North Sea. Through gunnery exercises that left his shoulders bruised from the gun charging handles. Through emergency procedures drilled until they became muscle memory. What to do when the engine quit, when the hydraulics failed, when you took cannon fire through the coolant system and the temperature gauge screamed into the red. He learned that the Mustang could turn with anything the Germans flew, that it could outdive a Focke-Wulf FW-190, that its 6 wing-mounted Brownings, each loaded with 400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, could saw an enemy fighter in half. He learned to nurse the fuel mixture, to manage the drop tanks, to breathe through the rubber oxygen mask that became your only friend above 20,000 feet, where the air was too thin to sustain human life. Most importantly, he learned what it felt like to be afraid. Part 3. First Blood. January 11th, 1944. Callahan's first combat mission. The target, Brunswick, Germany. Deep in enemy territory, beyond the range of most Allied fighters. But not beyond the range of Mustangs. They crossed the Dutch coast at 0900 hours. 51 P-51s from the 357th painted in the olive drab and gray of the 8th Air Force. Callahan flew as wingman to Captain Chuck Yeager. Yes, that Chuck Yeager, the laconic West Virginian who would later break the sound barrier. Yeager's voice crackled through the radio. Calm as Sunday dinner. Stay tight, kid. Check your 6 every 30 seconds. And don't fixate on any one bandit. There's always another one you didn't see. The German fighters appeared like hornets from a disturbed nest. Bf-109s and FW-190s, perhaps 60 of them, climbing hard to intercept. The radio exploded with urgent calls. Bandits, 12 o'clock level. I'm hit. I'm hit. Break right, blue 4. Callahan's first dogfight was a blur of violence and terror. A Focke-Wulf slashed past, so close he could see the yellow spinner, the black cross outlined in white. He yanked the stick, stomped rudder, trying to follow, but the German pilot was skilled, rolling, diving, using every trick. Callahan's hands were shaking. His oxygen mask fogged. The G-forces during the hard turn made his vision gray at the edges. Then Yeager's voice, calm and deadly. Lead him to the right, Jake. I've got him. Callahan banked right. The Focke-Wulf followed, closing for the kill. Yeager's Mustang appeared from above like an avenging angel. The Browning spoke, that distinctive hammering roar, and the German fighter came apart, pieces tumbling through the sky like confetti at a parade celebrating death. Good decoy, kid, Yeager said. Now let's go save some bombers. They did. For 4 more hours, the Mustang shepherded the B-17s through flak and fighters, all the way to Brunswick and back. Callahan fired his guns 3 more times that day, scoring hits on 2 enemy aircraft but confirming no kills. When they landed back at Leiston, his flight suit was soaked with sweat despite the cold. His hands wouldn't stop trembling for an hour. 7 pilots from the 357th didn't come back. Par 4, Berlin. By March 1944, the Mustang had changed everything. The 8th Air Force could now strike Berlin, the capital of the Third Reich itself, with fighter escort the entire way. The psychological impact on the Luftwaffe was devastating. For years, they had owned the skies over Germany. Now, silver-skinned American fighters appeared everywhere, outnumbering, outclimbing, outlasting the German defenders. March 6th was Callahan's 12th mission. The briefing had been somber. Gentlemen, target is Berlin. We expect heavy resistance. Very heavy. The Luftwaffe will throw everything at us. They weren't exaggerating. The bomber stream stretched across 100 miles of sky, over 700 B-17s and B-24s, their contrails painting white lines against the blue. Callahan's flight escorted the lead elements, weaving above and behind the fortresses like sheepdogs protecting a flock. The landscape below scrolled past. Holland, then Germany, industrial cities and rail yards occasionally erupting in flak bursts. Black puffs of exploding 88mm shells that could shred an aircraft. Then the Luftwaffe came. They hit the formation near Magdeburg, 50 miles short of Berlin. Perhaps 200 German fighters, every Bf-109 and FW-190 they could scrape together, plus twin-engine Me, 110 destroyer aircraft armed with rockets. The radio became chaos. Schwarm at 2 o'clock. Watch the Zerstorers. Rockets. I'm bingo fuel. Red Dog 5 is going down. Callahan found himself in a turning fight with a Bf-109 piloted by someone who knew his business. They spiraled downward through 20,000 feet, both aircraft shuddering at the edges of stalls as they tried to outturn each other. The German was good, very good, probably an expert with 100 kills. Callahan's altitude advantage bled away. His airspeed dropped dangerously low. Then he remembered his training. The Mustang's best attribute wasn't its turn radius. It was speed and energy retention. Callahan shoved the throttle forward, pushed the nose down, and converted altitude into velocity. The Merlin howled. The airspeed indicator climbed past 400 miles per hour. The Messerschmitt tried to follow, but couldn't match the Mustang's acceleration. Callahan zoomed back up, converting speed back into altitude, and found himself above and behind the German. One burst from 300 yards. The 109's engine exploded in a gout of flame and glycol. The enemy pilot bailed out, parachute blossoming white against the patchwork farmland below. Callahan felt no triumph, only exhaustion and the urgent need to get back to the bombers. When he climbed back to altitude, he found carnage. Two B-17s were falling, one spinning with its wings torn off, the other sliding earthward in a flat descent, trailing flames. But the Mustangs had bloodied the Luftwaffe badly. The sky was littered with German parachutes and falling aircraft. The bombers reached Berlin. They dropped their loads, and the Mustangs brought them home. Part 5. The Red Tails. Not all Mustang pilots were white. In April 1944, Callahan's group flew a joint mission with the 332nd Fighter Group, the Tuskegee Airmen, known by their distinctive red-painted tail assemblies. These men had fought 2 wars, one against Nazi Germany and one against the racism of their own country. They had been told they were inferior, incapable, unfit to fly. They had proven those lies wrong in blood and fire. Callahan flew wing for Captain Lee Archer of the 332nd during an escort mission to Ploesti, the oil refineries in Romania that fueled the German war machine. It was a milk run until it wasn't, until 24 FW-190s bounced the formation near the target. Archer's voice came through, professional and unhurried. Red flight, break left and engage. We've got bombers to protect. The Red Tails tore into the Germans with savage efficiency. Archer himself shot down 2 Focke-Wulfs in less than 3 minutes, flying with a precision that looked effortless but was actually the result of countless hours of training at Tuskegee, where they had been held to higher standards than white pilots because they had to be to overcome the prejudice. After the mission, Callahan shook Archer's hand. "You fly like you've been doing this your whole life." Archer smiled, but his eyes were hard. "We fly like our lives depend on it." "Because they do. Every mission, we have to prove we belong here." "You've proven it," Callahan said quietly. "Anyone who says otherwise is a fool." The 332nd Fighter Group would compile an extraordinary record: 112 aerial victories, 150 distinguished flying crosses, and a reputation for never losing a bomber under their escort, though historians would later debate the perfect accuracy of that claim. The legend spoke to their dedication and skill. They were Mustang men, same as Callahan. The aircraft didn't care about skin color. It responded only to skill, courage, and will. Part 6. The Cost. May 28, 1944. A mission to Dessau. Callahan's wingman was Lieutenant Bobby Martinez, a 21-year-old from Arizona with a crooked smile and a talent for cards. They had flown together for 3 months. Bobby had a photograph of his girl tucked in his flight jacket, Maria, dark-haired and beautiful, waiting for him in Phoenix. The mission went bad over Leipzig. Heavy flak damaged Bobby's coolant system. The temperature gauge climbed. White vapor streamed from the Merlin as glycol boiled away. Bobby's Mustang was dying. "Jake," Bobby's voice came through the radio, tight with controlled fear. "I'm not going to make it back. Temps at 120 and climbing." "Bail out," Callahan said immediately. "Get low, find a field, and jump. You'll be a POW, but you'll be alive." "What about Maria?" "You'll see her again. After the war. But only if you jump." "Now, Bobby. Now." For 10 seconds, silence. Then, "All right. Thanks for everything, Jake. Tell the guys." The radio went dead. Callahan watched Bobby's Mustang slide earthward, trailing steam. At 8,000 feet, the canopy flew off. A small figure tumbled out. The parachute opened, a white flower blooming in the deadly garden of war. Callahan never saw Bobby Martinez again. He later learned Bobby had been captured and spent the rest of the war in Stalag Luft III. He survived. Maria was waiting when he came home. But that moment, watching his wingman fall away into enemy territory, hollowed something out of Jake Callahan that never quite grew back. This was the cost. The price of victory measured in friends who disappeared, in empty bunks, in personal effects packed into footlockers and shipped home to families who would weep over them. The Mustang was a magnificent aircraft, but it couldn't protect you from loss. Part 7. The Final Mission. April 16, 1945. The war was almost over. The Russians were in Berlin. Hitler was in his bunker. The Luftwaffe was a shattered remnant, but they still flew. Callahan, now a major with 16 confirmed kills, led a flight of 8 Mustangs on a ground attack mission near Dresden. The days of massive bomber escorts were largely over. Now the Mustangs prowled the German countryside, destroying locomotives, truck convoys, anything that moved. They found a German airfield with a dozen FW-190s attempting to take off, a desperate, suicidal sortie by pilots who knew the war was lost but fought anyway, because it was all they knew how to do. Callahan's flight strafed the field, Brownings tearing up aircraft and hangars. It was target practice. It was slaughter. As Callahan climbed away, he saw one FW-190 get airborne, clawing for altitude. The German pilot was brave or foolish or both. Callahan could have let him go. The kid was no threat, probably had 10 hours flight time, and would crash trying to land. But Callahan's training, his instincts, his months of conditioning took over. He rolled in behind the Focke-Wulf. One burst. The German fighter exploded. As Callahan flew through the debris field, he felt nothing. No satisfaction. No triumph. Just a vast, hollow weariness. That night in the officers' club at Leiston, he got drunk for the first time in the war. When Chuck Yeager asked him what was wrong, Callahan said, "I killed a kid today. Couldn't have been more than 18. The war's over and I killed him anyway." Yeager was quiet for a long moment. Then, yeah, that's what makes it hard to go home. We're good at this now. Too good. And that's a hell of a thing to be good at. Part 8. Silver Legacy. On May 8th, 1945, Germany surrendered. Jake Callahan flew his P-51 Mustang, Maria's Promise, painted on the nose in honor of Bobby Martinez's girl, back to the United States in July. He was 24 years old and felt like 60. He had flown 68 combat missions, 16 confirmed aerial victories, the Distinguished Flying Cross with 2 oak leaf clusters, the Air Medal with 9 oak leaf clusters, and ghosts. So many ghosts. But the Mustang had done what its designers promised. It had won the air war over Europe. By escorting the bombers all the way to any target in the Reich, the P-51 had forced the Luftwaffe into a battle of attrition it couldn't win. German fighter pilot losses became catastrophic. Training programs collapsed. Fuel shortages grounded squadrons. By mid-1944, Allied fighters outnumbered the Luftwaffe 10-1 over Germany. The numbers told the story. Mustang pilots claimed nearly 5,000 enemy aircraft destroyed in air combat. The 357th Fighter Group alone, Callahan's unit, destroyed 609 aircraft, more than any other fighter group in the 8th Air Force. The 4th Fighter Group, flying Mustangs from early 1944, became the top-scoring group with over 1,000 aerial victories. The Tuskegee Airmen's 332nd compiled their remarkable record. But statistics couldn't capture what the Mustang really meant. It meant that bomber crews, kids from Iowa and Tennessee and Oregon, had a fighting chance of coming home. It meant that the strategic bombing campaign could finally hit the factories, oil refineries, and rail yards that fueled the Nazi war machine. It meant that Allied air superiority over Europe became absolute, setting the stage for D-Day and the final push into Germany. Technically, the aircraft was a masterpiece. The Merlin engine gave it speed and high-altitude performance. The laminar flow wing provided exceptional range and efficiency. The 6.50 caliber Brownings delivered devastating firepower. The bubble canopy offered 360-degree visibility. And the drop tank system, 108-gallon external tanks that could be jettisoned when empty, solved the range equation that had stymied earlier fighters. The Mustang could do 437 miles per hour, climb to 41,900 feet, and fly 1,650 miles. On paper, those were just numbers. In practice, they meant freedom to operate anywhere over occupied Europe. They meant the Luftwaffe couldn't hide, couldn't rest, couldn't rebuild. But for Jake Callahan, sitting in his backyard in Kansas in August 1945, watching the sun set over wheat fields that looked nothing like the burning landscape of Germany, the Mustang meant something else. It meant he had survived. Epilogue: What remains? Jake Callahan lived until 2003. He never flew again after the war. Couldn't bring himself to climb into a cockpit, even for a joyride. He married, had 3 children, worked as an electrical engineer. He rarely spoke about the war unless asked directly, and even then, his answers were brief. But once a year, every year until he died, he attended the 357th Fighter Group reunion. He would see Chuck Yeager, who became the most famous test pilot in history. He would remember the pilots who didn't come home. And he would look at the restored P-51 Mustangs on display, polished aluminum gleaming in the sun, Merlin engines occasionally roaring to life for demonstration flights, and feel something complicated and profound. Pride, sorrow, gratitude, guilt, love. The P-51 Mustang became legend. It flew in Korea. It served with air forces around the world for decades. It became an icon of American aviation, the most successful fighter of World War II, a symbol of technological excellence, and the pilots who flew it into hell and brought each other home. In Callahan's study, on a shelf beside photographs of his family, sat a small model of a P-51D with Maria's Promise painted on the nose. Sometimes his grandchildren would ask him about it. "Grandpa, did you really fly one of these?" And he would nod, touch the model gently, and say, "I did. We all did. It was the most beautiful, terrible thing I ever experienced. That airplane saved my life a dozen times. It made me a killer. It turned boys into men and men into ghosts. And I loved every bolt and rivet of it, even as I hated what it made me become." Do you miss it? Callahan would be quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the peaceful Kansas sky. Every day, he would finally say, every single day, because the Mustang wasn't just an airplane. It was youth and courage and terror and brotherhood and sacrifice. It was the machine that won a war and the symbol of the cost of that victory. It was silver wings carrying young men into combat at 28,000 feet, where the air was thin and cold, and the only thing between life and death was skill, luck, and the howl of a Merlin engine. The P-51 Mustang was legend, and the men who flew it were legends too, even if they never felt like heroes, even if they just felt like survivors. In the frozen sky over Nazi Germany, at the edge of human endurance and at the limits of mechanical possibility, the Mustang and its pilots wrote history in contrails and gunsmoke. They paid for victory in blood and youth, and they left us a legacy we can